Chapter 1. Echoes of the Past, Hints of the Present. "You're gonna trip," Eric King stated, his voice a low thrum against the backdrop of the campus quad. He didn't even look up from his sketchbook, just kept his hazel eyes fixed on the intricate lines forming under his charcoal. Dean Evans, meanwhile, was attempting a precarious balancing act on a low stone wall, one hand casually shoved into the pocket of his faded hoodie, the other gesticulating wildly as he recounted a particularly chaotic soccer practice. "Relax, King. I'm practically a ninja. A really tall, ridiculously handsome ninja." Eric snorted, a dimple flashing in his cheek. "More like a bull in a china shop. Remember that time in 5th grade you accidentally knocked over Mrs. Davison's prize-winning papier-mâché volcano?" Dean paused mid-pivot. His ocean blue eyes narrowed playfully. "Hey, that volcano was structurally unsound. And besides," he hopped down, landing with an easy grace that belied his earlier clumsiness, "I was a terror in 5th grade. A charming but undeniable terror. You, on the other hand, were probably meticulously color-coding your homework. Someone had to balance out your reign of playground terror," Eric muttered, finally glancing up. A soft breeze ruffled his dark brown hair. His gaze lingered on Dean's sandy blonde strands, momentarily caught by the sunlight. "You were quite the bully, you know. I still have a faint scar from that time you tripped me into the sandpit." Dean winced, though his easy smile quickly returned. "Exaggeration. It was a loving shove. Character building. Besides, you survived, didn't you? Made you stronger." He clapped Eric on the shoulder, a familiar, comforting weight. "Now, are you going to keep sketching that, whatever that is, or are you going to witness history as I conquer the cafeteria's mystery meat lasagna?" Eric rolled his eyes, but a small smile played on his lips. "It's a study of urban decay, Evans. And I've already witnessed history enough for one day with your soccer antics. Go get your culinary courage on. I'll join you in a bit." Dean hesitated for a second, his eyes tracing the subtle curve of Eric's arm as he moved the charcoal. He noticed the way Eric's brow furrowed in concentration, the quiet intensity that always seemed to surround him. It was a stark contrast to Dean's own boisterous energy, yet they fit together in a way that made sense, like two pieces of a complicated puzzle. There was a quiet depth to Eric that Dean had always appreciated, a counterpoint to the surface-level interactions he often had as the golden boy of the soccer team. "All right, don't let your art consume you," Dean said, a little more softly than usual. He turned to leave, but then, as an afterthought, he snagged a stray leaf from a nearby oak tree. He carefully placed it on Eric's sketchbook, right next to a half-finished drawing of a gnarled tree root. "Inspiration, King. Pure, unadulterated inspiration." Eric looked down at the leaf, then back up at Dean's retreating figure. He watched until Dean's athletic build disappeared around the corner of the student union. A faint blush crept up Eric's neck. "Idiot," he whispered, but the word was tinged with something akin to fondness. He picked up the leaf, twirling it between his fingers, before gently pressing it between the pages of his sketch pad, a small, unsolicited gift. Later that evening, after Dean had indeed conquered the mystery meat lasagna with questionable success, he found himself sprawled on his dorm bed, a well-worn notebook in hand. Instead of reviewing soccer drills, he was meticulously crafting lines, rhyming words, and trying to capture a feeling he couldn't quite name. His roommate, Jake, walked in, took one look, and burst out laughing. "Poetry, Dean? Seriously? You're supposed to be analyzing opponent defense strategies, not trying to woo someone with iambic pentameter." Dean quickly slammed the notebook shut, a blush creeping up his neck. "It's just a creative outlet, okay? Don't tell anyone." He shot Jake a warning glare, but his mind drifted to a pair of hazel eyes and a quiet intensity. He knew Eric would understand. Eric always did. Chapter 2. The Uncomfortable Truth. The campus quad, usually a serene expanse of green, had been transformed into an obstacle course of questionable design. Today was the annual Buddy Challenge, a charity event where teams of two navigated a series of increasingly ridiculous tasks, all for a good cause and bragging rights. Dean, naturally, had signed them up without consulting Eric. My partner in crime, or rather, my partner in questionable decisions, has arrived. Dean boomed, waving from the starting line. He was already stretched and bouncing on the balls of his feet, radiating an almost irritating amount of energy in his charity t-shirt. Eric approached, a long-suffering sigh escaping him. You signed us up for a three-legged race, a blindfolded puzzle, and what looks suspiciously like a pie-eating contest. I thought we were sketching this afternoon. He clutched his backpack tighter, as if it contained his last vestiges of dignity. Details, details, Dean dismissed with a wave. Think of it as character building. And teamwork. We're best friends. We'll dominate this thing. He grinned, that easy, charming smile that usually disarmed everyone. They started strong, navigating the three-legged race with surprising coordination, mostly thanks to Dean's booming commands and Eric's quiet, steady pace. The blindfolded puzzle, however, proved to be their undoing. Dean, tasked with guiding Eric, started giving increasingly frantic and vague directions. No left. My left. Your other left. The big, round piece, Eric. You're to drop it. Just like that time you dropped my lunch tray in 3rd grade. Dean yelled, his voice echoing across the quad. Eric froze, the puzzle piece clutched tight in his hand. The words, uttered in exasperation, hit him with an unexpected force. It wasn't the lunch tray he remembered. It was the way Dean had laughed, loud and unrepentant, while he stood there, covered in lukewarm spaghetti. It was the public humiliation, the casual cruelty that had felt so monumental to his younger self. He slowly pulled off his blindfold, hazel eyes fixed on Dean's face. Dean's boisterous energy deflated instantly, his smile faltering as he saw the shift in Eric's expression. Eric, what's wrong? That's what you used to do, Dean. Eric said quietly, his voice low and tight. Just like that. You'd find a way to make me feel small, and then you'd laugh it off. You really were a bully. The last word hung in the air, a stark, uncomfortable truth. The crowd around them, caught up in the chaos of the challenge, paid them no mind, but for Dean, the world seemed to narrow to just Eric's face. His usual quick wit failed him. He saw not just resentment, but a flicker of genuine hurt that he hadn't fully appreciated before. The playful charm he usually hid behind vanished. Eric, Dean started, then stopped, running a hand through his sandy blonde hair. He looked genuinely distressed. Look, I know. I was a complete idiot back then. I was trying to fit in, to be cool, and I thought being loud and messing with people made me seem confident. He swallowed hard, his ocean blue eyes serious, vulnerable. But that's not an excuse. What I did to you, and probably to others, it was wrong. I was a jerk. I am really, truly sorry, Eric. For all of it. For the sandpit, for the lunch tray, for everything. The apology was raw, devoid of his usual bravado. Eric watched him, surprised by the sudden depth of Dean's remorse. The sharp edge of his own anger softened, replaced by a strange warmth. Dean, the confident golden boy, looked genuinely sorry, almost lost. A whistle blew, signaling the end of the puzzle round. Other teams were moving on, but Dean and Eric remained, a bubble of quiet tension around them. It's okay, Eric finally said, his voice a little shaky. Sometimes it still stings, you know. Dean nodded, his gaze unwavering. I get it, and I don't blame you. He hesitated, then reached out, gently placing a hand on Eric's arm. The touch was light, reassuring, and completely different from his usual boisterous slaps on the back. It sent a jolt through Eric, a warmth spreading through his skin. Come on, Dean said, his voice softer now, almost coaxing. Let's go eat some pie. And maybe I can try and make it up to you, one bad challenge at a time. A small, hesitant smile played on his lips, not charming or easy, but genuine and hopeful. Eric looked down at the hand on his arm, then met Dean's eyes. The lingering discomfort from the past hadn't completely vanished, but something new had bloomed in its place, a fragile understanding, and perhaps a spark of something more. He managed a small, wry smile. Fine, but if you get pie on me, Dean Evans, you're buying me a new sketch pad. Dean's face lit up, and he squeezed Eric's arm gently before letting go. Deal, King. Deal. Chapter 3. Shifting Sands and New Discoveries. The apology, raw and unexpected, had fundamentally shifted something between Dean and Eric. The old dynamic, a comfortable but slightly dusty blanket, had been peeled back, revealing a new layer of softness and light. The bully comment hadn't created distance. It had, ironically, forged a new kind of closeness. In the days that followed, Dean's efforts to make it up to Eric were both earnest and occasionally hilarious. He'd show up at Eric's dorm with ridiculously oversized coffees, insisting on accompanying him to the library, even though he mostly just fidgeted. And once, he even attempted to organize Eric's chaotic art supplies, leading to a colorful explosion of charcoal, dust, and paint. You know, for someone who claims to be making amends, you're doing a pretty good job of re-traumatizing me, Eric deadpanned one afternoon, watching Dean try to sharpen a pencil with a butter knife. They were in Eric's dorm room, a space usually reserved for quiet contemplation and the scent of turpentine, now filled with Dean's boisterous energy. Dean grinned, undeterred. Hey, I'm putting in the effort. It's the thought that counts, right? Besides, he said, abandoning the knife and picking up one of Eric's half-finished sketches, a detailed rendering of a twisted tree branch. This is incredible, King. Seriously, how do you even do this? Eric felt a familiar blush creep up his neck, but this time, it was laced with a pleasant warmth. Dean's genuine admiration always caught him off guard. It's just practice. Observation. Well, observe this, Dean challenged, suddenly picking up a spare sketchbook and a pencil. Teach me. Show me how to make a stick look like it's lived 1,000 years. Eric blinked. Dean, Mr. Golden Boy athlete, wanting to sketch? It was as out of character as Eric wanting to join the soccer team. You're serious? Dead serious. Maybe it'll help my poetry. Dean mumbled the last part, almost too quietly for Eric to hear. And so, their afternoons began to intertwine in new ways. Dean would often join Eric at his usual sketching spots around campus. The sprawling oak trees near the library, the intricate Gothic architecture of the old administration building, or even just the lively bustle of the student union. Dean's initial attempts were comically terrible, his stick figures looking like they'd been drawn by a toddler with a sugar rush. Eric, for his part, found a surprising delight in guiding him, his quiet intensity replaced by a patient amusement. No, Dean, try holding it looser. Less like you're trying to stab the paper, more like you're petting a very delicate, angry cat, Eric instructed, gently adjusting Dean's grip one sunny afternoon. Their fingers brushed, and a tiny, almost imperceptible spark seemed to jump between them. Dean cleared his throat, suddenly overly focused on his wobbly circle. Eric, however, was starting to feel a different kind of internal friction. Every casual touch, every shared laugh over Dean's artistic failures, every time Dean's ocean blue eyes lingered on him, sent a ripple through him that was more than just friendship. It was a terrifying, exhilarating flutter in his chest. Dean's openness, his newfound vulnerability, was incredibly attractive. But Eric was still so careful, so guarded about his own identity. Dean was so effortlessly himself. What would he think if he knew Eric's feelings went beyond friendship? The thought both thrilled and terrified him, a silent battle waging beneath his composed exterior. One evening, Dean found Eric staring intently at his phone, headphones on, a thoughtful frown on his face. What's got you so deep in thought, King? New indie band discovery. Eric startled, pulling out one earbud. Oh, yeah, something like that. Just listening to some new stuff. He quickly clicked off the screen, but not before Dean caught a glimpse of a rainbow flag emoji in a social media post. Dean's brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, but he just nodded, his charming smile back in place. Cool. Hey, I heard there's a late-night hike up to Miller's Point this weekend. Great for photography. You can see the whole city lights. Want to come? My treat. Eric hesitated, his heart doing a strange little leap. A hike. Just the two of them. It was a step into something new, something that felt bigger than just friends. Dean was offering an opening, a space for exploration. Eric swallowed, the battle within him momentarily silenced by the inviting warmth of Dean's smile. Yeah, Eric finally said, a small, genuine smile gracing his lips. Yeah, I like that, Dean. Chapter 4. Jealousy and Misunderstandings. The hike to Miller's Point was everything Eric had hoped for, and more. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, and the ascent was just challenging enough to get their blood pumping. Dean, true to his word, led the way, occasionally turning back to offer Eric a hand over a tricky route or a loose patch of gravel. He pointed out different tree species with surprising knowledge, and even hummed along to some indie song Eric had once mentioned. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and soft purples, they reached the summit. The city lights began to twinkle below them, a sprawling tapestry against the darkening landscape. Dean, with his camera, seemed to come alive. He moved around, capturing angles, his sandy blonde hair catching the last rays of light, his ocean blue eyes alight with passion. Eric watched him, feeling a pang that was both sweet and sharp. This was the Dean few people saw, the sensitive artist, not just the confident jock. "Catch this," Dean called out, turning his camera on Eric, who quickly ducked his head, a blush rising. "Come on, King, I need a subject with that thoughtful, brooding artist vibe." Eric laughed, the sound light and free. "You'll just get me squinting at the camera, trying to figure out if you're actually serious." They stayed up there for what felt like hours, sharing quiet conversation, the hum of the city a distant lullaby. It was perfect, too perfect, Eric thought later, as they descended, the romantic haze of the mountain giving way to the stark reality of campus life. The following week, the soccer team had a major game, and Dean, as usual, was the star. He scored the winning goal in the final minutes, sending the stands into a frenzy. Eric, cheering from the sidelines, felt a swell of pride. But after the game, as Dean was mobbed by fans, Eric found himself fading into the background. "Dean, amazing game." A tall, striking brunette with perfectly curled hair and a cheerleader's uniform practically materialized by Dean's side, draping an arm around his shoulders. "You were incredible. We should celebrate. There's a team party tonight. You have to come." Dean, flushed with victory, flashed his charming smile. "Hey, Maya. Yeah, sounds good. I'll see what I can do." He glanced over the heads of the small crowd, his eyes searching for Eric. Their gazes met for a brief moment across the throng, but before Eric could even offer a small wave, Maya pulled Dean closer, whispering something that made him chuckle. A chill ran down Eric's spine. Maya. He knew her. She was a year older, universally popular, and undeniably gorgeous. She was also the kind of person who seemed perfectly suited for Dean Evans, the college's golden boy. The thought twisted in Eric's gut. Of course, Dean was straight. Of course, he'd be interested in someone like Maya. He felt a familiar, protective wall slam back into place around his heart. The soft intimacy of the hike felt like a distant dream, replaced by the loud, flashing reality of Dean's world. Dean was so open, so effortlessly himself, that Eric had almost forgotten how carefully he guarded his own truths. He pulled his backpack tighter and slipped away from the cheering crowd, a familiar ache settling in his chest. Later that evening, Dean texted him, "Party at the frat house. Come on, King, you earn it too." Eric stared at the message, a bitter taste in his mouth. He imagined Dean and Maya, laughing, dancing, maybe something more. The image gnawed at him. He typed out a quick reply. "Nah, got a big psych paper due. Gonna hit the library hard." He ignored Dean's follow-up question. "You sure? You seemed a little off after the game." Dean, meanwhile, stood awkwardly at the edge of the noisy frat party, a plastic cup in his hand, his eyes scanning the room. He'd tried Eric's dorm, called him, even texted again. Eric's terse reply about the paper had felt like a dismissal, a cold shoulder. Dean had been so sure that the hike, those quiet moments on a mountain, had meant something more. He'd felt a connection, a deepening of their friendship that had started to feel exciting. But now Eric was pulling away, just as he seemed to be getting closer. Had he done something wrong? Said something wrong? Maya, sensing his distraction, sidled up to him. "Everything okay, Dean? You look like you're trying to solve the mysteries of the universe." Dean forced a smile, just thinking about the next game strategy. He was lying, and he knew Eric would have seen right through it. The thought only made him feel worse. He couldn't shake the image of Eric's distant gaze across the soccer field. Eric was usually so steady, so predictable. This sudden chill was baffling, and it stung more than Dean cared to admit. He found himself wishing he was back on that quiet mountain, just him and Eric under the stars. Chapter 5. The Confession, Almost. The distance between Dean and Eric festered for days. Eric became a master of evasion, perfecting the art of just leaving a room as Dean entered or burying his face in a textbook whenever Dean approached. Dean, usually so attuned to Eric, felt an unfamiliar frustration gnawing at him. He tried to corner Eric by their lockers, in the cafeteria, even ambushed him leaving a psychology lecture. "Eric, seriously, what's going on?" Dean finally managed to pin him down outside the campus library, blocking his path with his imposing frame. Eric clutched his backpack to his chest, avoiding Dean's gaze. "Nothing's going on, Dean. I told you I'm just busy. Finals are coming up." Eric's voice was clipped, too sharp. Dean's easy smile had vanished. His ocean blue eyes were serious, almost hurt. "Busy? We've been practically attached at the hip for weeks, and now you're acting like I have the plague. Did I say something? Do something." Eric finally met his eyes, and Dean saw the stormy confusion swirling there. "It's not you," Eric mumbled, but his conviction wavered. "Then what is it? Because it feels like me. It feels like you're shutting me out, and after everything, I thought we were past that." Dean's voice was softer now, laced with genuine concern. He was remembering Eric's quiet intensity, the vulnerability he'd shown after the bully comment. He knew there was more to this than just a psych paper. The raw honesty in Dean's voice cracked Eric's carefully constructed facade. He sighed, deflating slightly. "It's complicated, Dean. It's not something I can just say." Dean stepped closer, his shadow falling over Eric. "Try me, King. I'm a pretty good listener, despite popular opinion." He paused, then added, "You can tell me anything. You know that, right?" Eric looked away, his gaze fixed on a distant point, grappling with the words. He felt the weight of Dean's expectation, the warmth of his presence. This was it. This was the moment. He could tell him. He could finally lay bare the confusing, exhilarating, terrifying feelings that had been bubbling beneath the surface. It's about how I see things," Eric began, his voice barely a whisper. "And how I see myself. And when you're so open and everyone just gets you, it makes it harder for me. Because I'm not like that." He swallowed, his throat tight. He was about to confess, about to tell Dean that his easy charm and genuine kindness were making Eric fall for him, making him question everything he thought he knew about himself. Dean, misinterpreting the direction of Eric's struggle, put a comforting hand on his shoulder. Hey, I get it. College is tough. Figuring yourself out is tough. And believe me, not everyone gets me. Sometimes I feel like I'm putting on a show too, trying to be the guy everyone expects." He offered a small, understanding smile. "Look, if you're struggling with self-acceptance or figuring out your path, you're not alone. We all go through it. Even talk to me, seriously. No judgment. Ever." Eric's confession died on his lips, a bitter pill in his throat. Dean's words, meant to be reassuring, had accidentally built another wall. He was talking about general college angst, about the universal struggle of identity. He wasn't talking about this. He wasn't talking about Eric's hidden feelings for him, about the terrifying prospect of coming out, especially to his straight best friend. Dean had seen his struggle, but not the nature of it. "Right," Eric managed, a dry laugh escaping him. "Yeah, just college stuff. You're right." He pulled away from Dean's touch, the warmth quickly fading. The opportunity had come and gone, swallowed by misunderstanding. Dean looked at him, his brow furrowed with lingering concern, but also a hint of frustration. "Okay," he said slowly. "Just don't disappear on me, all right? You know where to find me." He paused, then, as if on impulse, reached out and lightly flicked Eric's ear. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to rescue Jay from another one of his terrible dating app choices. He's trying to impress someone by reciting Shakespeare, and it's a car crash." Eric almost smiled. That was the familiar Dean, the one who found humor in everything, who was always there to pick up the pieces for his friends. The brief moment of intense vulnerability, of almost revealing his truth, evaporated, leaving only a lingering ache. As Dean jogged off, leaving Eric alone by the library steps, Eric sighed, running a hand over his face. He'd had his chance, and he'd choked. The confession was still unsaid, a heavy, beautiful weight in his heart. Chapter 6. A helping hand and a leap of faith. Dean couldn't shake the conversation with Eric by the library. College stuff. Figuring yourself out. The words echoed in his mind. He knew Eric, knew him better than anyone. This wasn't just college stuff. There was a deeper current running beneath Eric's reserved exterior, something he was grappling with that went beyond academic pressure. Dean had seen the flicker of something profound in Eric's eyes, even if he couldn't quite name it. He thought back to the rainbow emoji he'd glimpsed on Eric's phone. He'd shrugged it off then, but now, combined with Eric's intense, almost painful confession about not being open, a new possibility began to click into place. It was a subtle, growing realization, not a thunderclap, but a gentle dawning. And once it dawned, Dean couldn't unsee it. He decided to be subtle, to create space without pushing. He started casually mentioning things, almost offhand. Hey, did you see the announcement about the diversity in art exhibition next month? Sounds pretty cool. Or I heard some of the student groups are doing an Open Minds campus fair next week. Might be interesting, right? He'd gauge Eric's reaction, looking for any flicker of interest, any sign that he was on the right track. Eric, initially, remained guarded. He'd nod, maybe offer a non-committal, but Dean's consistent, gentle nudges started to chip away at his defenses. He noticed that Dean wasn't just talking about these things. He was subtly trying to integrate them into their shared time. One afternoon, Dean, instead of suggesting their usual spot under the oak tree, led them past the campus's LGBTQ+ resource center. He didn't point it out, just walked casually by, giving Eric a chance to notice. Then came the accidental breakthrough. They were grabbing coffees at the campus cafe, and a small group of students from the Queer Student Alliance were excitedly planning an upcoming event, their voices carrying easily. Eric tensed, ready to make a quick exit. Sounds like they're putting together a good community, Dean remarked, taking a sip of his coffee, completely nonchalant. He glanced at Eric, a small, encouraging smile on his face. It's cool, right? Having spaces where people can just be themselves, no questions asked. Eric looked at Dean, truly looked at him. There was no judgment in his eyes, no curiosity that felt invasive, just an open, genuine acceptance. Dean, the golden boy, the confident jock, was looking at him with a warmth that felt like a lifeline. In that moment, a fundamental truth solidified for Eric. Dean wasn't just okay with it. He was actively creating a safe space. It was the final push Eric needed. The constant, quiet support from Dean, the way he consistently treated Eric with such unwavering kindness, chipped away at Eric's fear. If Dean, his best friend, his bully from elementary school, could be this accepting, then maybe, just maybe, Eric could be accepted by others too. More importantly, he could accept himself. The image of Dean on Miller's Point, alive with passion, mixed with the quiet, understanding look he was giving him now, solidified a new resolve in Eric's heart. Later that evening, Eric found himself pacing his dorm room. He couldn't put it off any longer. He needed to tell Dean, not just about his sexuality, but about how much Dean himself meant to him, how his presence had become the quiet anchor in his life. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Dean's contact. His heart hammered in his chest, a drum solo of fear and exhilarating hope. He typed out a message, then deleted it. Too casual, too formal. He called Jake, Dean's roommate, instead. Hey, is Dean around? Eric asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Nah, he just headed out, Jake replied. Said he was going to the soccer field. Needed to clear his head, or something. Eric's mind raced. The soccer field. Empty, quiet under the setting sun. Perfect. This couldn't be a text. This couldn't be a rushed conversation in a crowded hallway. This had to be face to face. Taking a deep breath, Eric made a decision that felt like the biggest leap of his life. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the field, his heart thrumming with nervous energy, but also a new, exhilarating sense of purpose. He was done hiding. Chapter 7. The Confession, finally, in first steps. The late afternoon sun cast long, distorted shadows across the soccer field as Eric approached. Dean was there, just as Jake had said, kicking a ball around idly, the rhythmic thud echoing in the quiet air. He looked like a painting, golden hour light catching his sandy blonde hair, his athletic form fluid and strong. A lump formed in Eric's throat. This was it. No more hiding. Dean finally noticed Eric standing by the sidelines and stopped, letting the ball roll to a halt. His brow furrowed with familiar concern. "Hey, King. What's up? Everything okay with that psych paper?" Eric walked onto the field, his steps slow but resolute. He stopped a few feet from Dean, the silence between them suddenly thick with unspoken words. Dean sensed the shift, the air charged with something heavier than usual. His playful smile faded, replaced by a quiet watchfulness. "The psych paper's fine," Eric began, his voice surprisingly steady, though his hands trembled slightly. He took a deep breath. "It's not about the paper, Dean. It's about what I tried to tell you the other day." He met Dean's ocean blue eyes, unwavering. "When I said I struggled with seeing myself, it's because I'm gay, Dean." The words hung in the air, clear and stark. Dean's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, but his expression remained unreadable. Eric braced himself, waiting for the shock, the awkwardness, the subtle pulling away he'd always feared. Instead, Dean just nodded slowly, a soft exhalation escaping him. "Okay," he said, his voice quiet, even. "Thank you for telling me, Eric. That took a lot of courage." Eric blinked, surprised by the gentle response. There's more," he continued, his heart hammering against his ribs. "It's not just that. It's about you." He took another shaky breath, the words tumbling out now in a rush. I've been falling for you, Dean. For a while now. Longer than I probably even realized. You're my best friend, and you're just everything. And that scares the hell out of me, but I can't keep it in anymore." He finished, breathless, his gaze fixed on Dean's face, searching for any sign of rejection. Dean stood frozen for a moment. Then a slow, incredulous smile began to spread across his face. Not his usual charming grin, but something softer, more vulnerable. His eyes, usually so bright, shimmered with an emotion Eric couldn't quite decipher. He took a step closer, then another, until he was right in front of Eric. You have no idea, do you, King?" Dean murmured, his voice rough with emotion. He reached out, his large hand gently cupping Eric's cheek. Eric instinctively leaned into the warmth of the touch. "You have no idea how much I've wanted to hear you say that." Eric stared, completely bewildered. "What? I've been falling for you too? You oblivious artist," Dean confessed, a genuine, joyful laugh bubbling up, laced with a touch of exasperation. "Since elementary school, probably. Even when I was being a total punk. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just the best friend thing, the protective thing. And then, when you started pulling away after the game, I thought I completely screwed it up. I thought you saw me as just the stupid jock, and you'd never want anything more." He shook his head, a mixture of relief and disbelief washing over his face. "All those poems I was secretly writing? Yeah, they were for you, you dork." Eric's jaw dropped. The bully from elementary school, the charming soccer star, had secretly been writing poetry for him? The absurdity and the sheer romance of it hit him simultaneously. A nervous, joyous laugh bubbled up from deep within him. "You wrote poetry for me?" Eric managed, tears pricking at his eyes, a wide, disbelieving smile breaking out on his face. "Every sappy, angsty line," Dean confirmed, his thumb gently stroking Eric's cheek. His eyes dropped to Eric's lips, and the air crackled between them. "Can I?" Eric didn't need him to finish the question. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, his eyes closing. Dean leaned in, slowly, giving Eric every chance to pull away. But Eric didn't. He met Dean halfway, their lips meeting in a tentative, soft press. It was awkward, sweet, and filled with the unspoken weight of years of friendship, shared history, and finally, confessed love. It wasn't a Hollywood kiss, but it was perfect. It was theirs. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, the setting sun bathed the field in a warm, golden glow. Dean's smile was wide, full of a giddy relief Eric had never seen on him before. "So," Dean said, his voice still a little husky, "does this mean you're going to teach me to draw stick figures that don't look like they're in mortal peril?" Eric laughed, a full, unrestrained sound that echoed across the quiet field. "Only if you promise to write me terrible poetry about it." He reached out, his hand finding Dean's, and squeezed. The world suddenly felt brighter, lighter, and full of possibilities. Chapter 8. Open Hearts, Bright Future. The first few days of being more than best friends were a delightful, clumsy dance. Dean, accustomed to being bold on the soccer field, was surprisingly tentative in this new, romantic territory. He'd reach for Eric's hand, then pull back, unsure. Eric, usually reserved, found himself wanting to initiate more, but his years of guardedness made him hesitant. Their first official date involved them accidentally showing up at the same campus event in hilariously matching, but unplanned, outfits, leading to a flurry of teasing from their mutual friends. "So are you two like in a club now?" Jake, Dean's roommate, quipped as they entered the student union for lunch, both wearing suspiciously similar gray hoodies and dark jeans. Dean just grinned, his arm casually brushing Eric's as they walked. Eric, to his own surprise, didn't pull away. Coming out, even to their closest circle, was surprisingly easy. Jake and Eric's roommate, Mark, had practically known for ages, often making playful comments about their platonic life partner's status. Their friends on the soccer and basketball teams, seeing Dean's genuine happiness and Eric's newfound ease, were largely supportive, if a little bewildered by how long it had taken the two of them to figure it out. The biggest hurdle was Eric's lingering fear of judgment from outsiders, but Dean's unwavering openness became a shield. Dean, true to his word, poured his heart into his poetry, now with a clear muse. He'd leave Eric's small, crumpled notes with hastily scrawled verses on Eric's desk, often rhyming king with increasingly ridiculous words. "You wrote my love for you, dear king, makes my heart sing like a doorbell's ding," Eric read aloud one morning, holding the note up to Dean with a mixture of disbelief and genuine affection. Dean, stretched out on Eric's bed, sketching, surprisingly, his stick figures were improving, though still in peril, winked. "It's abstract. Poetic license, king. You wouldn't understand." "It's awful," Eric chuckled, but he folded the note carefully and tucked it into his psychology textbook. Their opposing personalities, once a source of gentle friction, now felt like complementary forces. Dean's confidence helped Eric step out of his shell, encouraging him to submit his sketches to the student art gallery, something he'd never dared to do before. Eric, in turn, grounded Dean, pulling him into quiet moments, encouraging him to explore the quiet depth he often hid. He even got Dean to listen to his indie music, something Dean surprisingly enjoyed, swaying awkwardly but enthusiastically to the beats. One crisp autumn evening, they found themselves back on Miller's Point, the city lights twinkling below them like scattered diamonds. Dean had brought his camera, and Eric his sketchbook. They sat shoulder to shoulder, a comfortable silence settling between them. "Remember that night I told you? I almost told you everything here," Eric asked softly, leaning his head on Dean's shoulder. Dean wrapped an arm around him, pulling him closer. "Yeah, I was an idiot. So focused on my own perceived problems, I missed what was right in front of me." He kissed the top of Eric's head. "Glad you didn't give up on me, though, or your terrible taste in music." Eric laughed, nudging Dean playfully. "And I'm glad you stopped being a bully, Dean Evans." Dean chuckled, the sound deep and resonant. "Hey, I never bullied you, King. I was just trying to get your attention." He paused, then picked up a small, smooth stone from the ground. "This is for you, a token of my everlasting, non-bullying affection." He pressed it into Eric's hand. Eric looked at the stone, then up at Dean, his hazel eyes full of warmth. "You know, for a golden boy jock who used to trip kids in the sandpit, you turned out pretty all right, Evans." Dean just smiled, that genuine, heart-melting smile that had now become exclusively Eric's. He leaned in, his lips brushing Eric's. And for a quiet, intense artist who hated bullies, you fell for one. The kiss was slow and tender, a promise under the vast, starry sky. They had navigated the past, confronted uncomfortable truths, and taken terrifying leaps of faith. They were still Dean and Eric, the best friends who argued about everything from obscure indie bands to cafeteria mystery meat. But now, their story was unfolding, chapter by loving chapter, a comedy romance that was uniquely, wonderfully, and truly theirs.